got to understand how the money works in real estate, so you understand the lien, the title process, like how it all happens. Traditionally, people think that the bank just loans the money, and when it's really Wall Street, it's being aggregated to mortgage-backed securities. It gets so complicated that the average person's never going to understand it. How I ended up in real estate. I'm a data guy. I'm a techie. I've been in this game 25 years. Early on, when you wanted foreclosure data, it was called Sharkboard. It was only available in like 3 states. Because back then, there was a thing for realtors called MetroScan. When they had CD-ROMs, that's how they'd pull the data for the properties. They'd have to load the CD-ROM by disk. To get data from your county recorder, you had to buy it from them, and it was microfiche. Then you had those old big microfiche projectors. That's how you found foreclosure data back. So as a real estate investor, I was always looking for equity. We're looking for a spread. When I started working for Yarmy in the law firm and learning Chapter 11 bankruptcy, then there was a mindset shift. Wait a minute, you can create equity out of thin air.
How do you do that?
That's through the bankruptcy process.
Chris Craig, you're here today because you are in the curative title, distressed real estate, unique business line. You and I met on social media and chatted about all kinds of random things. And you said things that I've never heard anyone else here say before. And when I hear that stuff, I immediately have to know more. That's why you're here today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to bring value to your community.
You got it. I was walking in the conference room and we got Carl from North Carolina, McLean from the Dallas area, some of our guys, you, and I was just hearing these conversations and it reminded me of our early days where every day we were learning something new and testing and trying. And now we've kind of narrowed it down and we're doing a lot of the same stuff. But I just heard all this varying conversation. I was like, this reminds me of like the beginning.
It's always fun to, get creative, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff with curative title or creative issues is more, it involves litigation. But case law is not made. Just like they thought Einstein was crazy, right?
Yeah.
You got to throw slam at the wall till it sticks.
See what does stick.
Right.
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll get there in a minute. You and I've talked about work stuff, but tell me who's Chris outside of like a professional interest. Who's Chris?
Yeah. So young age, I've always been an entrepreneur since probably 14, 15 years old, had my first paper route when I was 10 years old when we were delivering newspapers back in the day, and you had to go collect the money from your customer. It was like $9 a month for a paper or something like that. So at one point, I had to think 80 papers, waking up at 4 a.m., 7 days a week. At a very young age. So that kind of gave me the spirit in a way.
But you did a little bit of collections in there too?
Well, I had to collect you had to collect from the company, your customers. And
You're a bulldog from 9 years old.
My little scooter or bike with the little old paper bags. I mean, I don't even think they let a kid. That would be probably considered child abuse today. But, from as a kid, lemonade stands, which is illegal these days.
Yeah.
So then, with high school, my senior year of high school, I went to Gonzaga University. I was one of them smart kids that like to party a lot. So, I've dabbled in all the stuff you're not supposed to at some point in my life. And then my father was in the Air Force, 20-something years in the Air Force, retired from the Air Force. So I graduated high school out of Spokane, Washington.
Oh, okay.
I'm originally from Auburn, California, which is just north of Sacramento.
So you're a West Coast guy.
Yeah, I'm a West Coast guy for the most part. And then after going to college, like my senior year of high school, I was just like, you know what? I'm not ready for this yet. So I decided to join the Marine Corps. My dad thought I was crazy. Like, where do you go to the Air Force? You can go do something different than the Marines. I'm like, no.
That says a lot about your personality.
I want to go what's hard. And I started playing rugby at like 16 years old. So I was playing for the Spokane Rugby Football Club. So I was the youngest rugby guy they ever had. But football got boring for me. Now Texas, football's big in Texas.
Big time.
There's some really good I played against some really good rugby teams out here in Texas. Dallas, Houston. There's some tough boys.
So you've got some grit. You like a challenge. You're a competitor.
Oh, yeah.
I'm seeing the personality for him.
And then so I spent 4 years active duty in the Marine Corps, then 4 years in the reserves. I was a communicator, so with telecommunications and radio. First duty station was Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. So that was very eye-opening on what, At
what age was this?
This was at 18 years old.
Oh, man.
I was in Guantanamo after going through my schools. They said, I got 4 slots for Guantanamo. I told the gunnery sergeant, sign me up. I want to go to where it's hard. The toughest place the Marine Corps
And they're
has.
like, all right, kid, I've seen your type. Let's go.
Let's go. So I was, heavy into physical fitness. At 220 pounds, I was running 3 miles in under 6 minutes.
Oh, you're a big dude at that age.
Yeah, I was big then. So, so that was during, we had the Cuban and Haitian migrant crisis during the 94, 95. And had a few of my friends get blown up by mines down there. And so a year there, and it was like, okay, well, you want to go to Camp Pendleton? I'm from the West Coast. So I ended up in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And because you want to
be more different than California.
Oh, California kid, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. It was like, whoa, this is really backwoods. But I'd never been to New York City.
Cold.
And no, not so much.
No?
Not in Jacksonville. In Jacksonville, North Carolina, it's pretty mild, and it can get cold.
Okay,
but it's a training base. So I mean, you got to be able to swim year round in the water and the whole 9 yards. So in the ocean, because you're training constantly year round. So aside from that, that was it. I drank a lot of beer, a lot of whiskey, a lot of tequila, and all that stuff because that's what Marines do, and fair share of bar fights. I also played rugby for the Marine Corps team. That was fun. And then when my time came, it was like I was just done. It was like, I've seen enough. Let's go try the civilian world. Initially, I was going to be a cop.
So 22 or 23 years old, you're done with your
21.
4 years? 21, you're done with your 4
22,
years?
I guess, yeah. Yeah, I got out in May of 1997. So I saved my leave. I got out 60 days early. And then I went to work for Pacific Bell, a telephone company.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was either cop for $30,000 a year, because that's what they were paying about then, or, I looked at Atlanta police, Houston. So Denver, I think I was like number 5 on the list.
You went to like the big cities.
Right.
You're, golly, cruising for a bruising.
Yeah. So then I was like, telephone companies paying me at 22 years old, like $28 an hour. Like, this is a long time. I'm 50 now. I'll be 50. That was good money a long time ago. Plus, then they were like, all the overtime you want. So the way the union rules worked in was I was on triple time by Wednesday.
Oh, you're making a lot of money.
20-some years old, making $130,000 a year. And, I'm still competitive. So I had this boss that I didn't get along with. And it was a year of like an El Nino when it rains a lot. So I was working out of San Mateo, California. So it was just, pissing rain for like months straight. So all the telephone lines, back when we had cables back then, everything's shorting out. It's got full of water. So he tells me to get up on a telephone pole. He goes, look, you need to splice this 2,200 pair cable, but you're going to do it on your spikes. Dude, I got a bucket truck. I'm going to use my tools. I'm not going to go, it's windy, it's raining. Like, my feet are going to get tired. They're going to be sore. He's like, well, that's basically your order. I'm like, nah, I'm not listening to you. So I took my bucket truck out there, got the work done. On the way out, it got stuck. So I had to go to this guy in a backhoe, like, hey, can you pull me out? It damaged the front bumper a little bit, but it wasn't like the truck was damaged, right? I got fired over that. But it was the best thing for me because technology was changing. It was when, Mother Bell got broken up into what they call competitive local exchange carriers. And so my other Marine buddy, he was working for another company back in Raleigh, North Carolina, is like, hey, come work for us, and we'll put you inside in the telephone plant, which is like the switching area. I'm like, cool, I can go to all those schools, Nortel when it was around. So I was a tech guy. Then .com hit. By 2000, I took a lot of startup jobs, like new employees. So I was from the phone company job to the next phone company, I was basically doubling my salary the longest job I ever had was 9 months.
Wow. You were just shopping the price, basically.
Right. Because they were recruiting you and paying you double and giving you stock options. And that was the thing of, right when E-Trade was starting to come out. So technology was changing.
Big change.
Big change then. .com hit. I was out of a job. The few companies I worked for went bankrupt.
Let me ask you this. Guys that do this kind of work generally have a similar financial perspective. What'd you do with your money at that time? Because you're earning an outsized income relative to what living expenses are.
What do 25, 23-year-old single dudes do with their money? That's what I didn't save anything.
Okay.
the bar got it.
Got it. Okay. These paint a picture, over time. Like,
Yeah,
we change and stuff happens. But
the reality of it was I was a party boy till I was 45. And I was single till I was 45. And then the blessing happened. I met my wife. We had a beautiful little girl. So now I have a 5-year-old. Then I have a stepson who's 10.
Okay.
So I'm a family guy now. Haven't had a drink of alcohol in almost 6 years now.
Good for you.
So
You and me both.
life changing.
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
And so much more clarity. So how I ended up in real estate. I'm a data guy. I'm a techie. I get this guy by the name of Douglas McCabe, still one of my best friends and mentors today. And through a friend of a friend, he needed a foreclosure database built. Now, this is before Property Radar or any of that stuff, or Shark. It used to be called SharkBait. Early on, when you wanted foreclosure data, it was called SharkBait.
Love that.
And it was only available I've been in this game 25 years, so it was only available in like 3 states and very few counties. Because back then, there was a thing for realtors called MetroScan. When they had CD-ROMs, that's how they'd pull the data for the properties. They'd have to load the CD-ROM by disk.
How antiquated. It's outdated in 3 days.
So to get data from your county recorder, you had to buy it from them, and it was microfiche. And then you had those old big microfiche projectors. That's how you found foreclosure data back then. And so we tried to use our technology, which we did. We created our own internal system to track our own foreclosures. So Doug McCabe said, hey, I need this database built. And so I was like, okay, I know the programmers that could do this. He goes, so how much do you think it's going to cost me? I'm like, hey, I need to make money. I'm like, $80,000 for that program you want. He's like, I don't think so. He goes, I think I can get it done for 10. And I was honest with him. I said, yeah, you're right. You can. He's like, well, where was the other 70,000 going to go? I was like, I was going to make 70,000 bucks.
I need some money.
I need money. He's like, boy, be here tomorrow at Saturday morning. You're either going to sink or you're going to swim. And I'm going to teach you real estate and real estate finance.
And this time your late 20s, maybe?
This was in 2001.
25 years ago. So mid-20s.
Yeah. So I was 26, I guess. And so I would go around with him knocking doors. In Portland, Oregon is where I started my real estate career. Distressed real estate, knocking doors. And then I would study the law, bankruptcy, meet with bankruptcy attorneys. Because, that's always a strategy. Have the seller go to BK to figure out,
buy a little time.
Buy a little time. And, so Portland, Oregon, I spent from 1998 till 2004 there. Then 2004, I moved to Las Vegas. But, McCabe taught me pretty much a lot of most of what
Were you working with him on a commission basis or as a profit share? How'd that look?
So he was the money guy, and he would give me 10%.
Got it.
And then he taught me mortgages, so I was writing paper. I was a loan officer before there was even any licensing. And so I think the critical learning path there was you got to understand how the money works in real estate so you understand the lien, the title process, like how it all happens. Because traditionally people think that the bank just loans the money, and when it's really Wall Street, it's being aggregated to mortgage-backed securities. Like it gets so complicated that the average person's never going to understand it. Even Bank of America, you go get a loan from Bank of America, they're going to lend it to you today and they're going to sell that off tomorrow.
Yeah.
So that was my start in it in distressed real estate, and I've pretty much ever since then I've never I've learned more.
You got bit. It's in your blood.
That was it. It's fun. It's interesting, and there's so many facets to just real estate in general. You just got to find your niche, But you got to be able to adapt and overcome because niches go away.
Things change quick, especially in today when we have
Especially
great
now.
communication, great data. So what brought you from Portland over to Vegas?
Competition. There was no competition in Vegas.
Oh, and Portland was getting a lot of it.
Yeah, there was too many guys showing up. Plus, it was McCabe's backyard, and we had a little bit of falling out because I kind of went out on my own. Then we,
Got it.
kissed and made up years later, and we've had a great relationship ever since. So, but back then I even started a nonprofit called the National Foreclosure Prevention Agency.
Oh, goodness.
So that was the bait that would get people postcards saying, "Hey, let's try to help you out." So the strategy was look to help the person out to gain their trust. And if we couldn't get them a loan modification, now we were doing loan modifications.
So you genuinely say, I'm going to try to help these folks with a loan mod or something, and I'm willing to do this for people for free as long as I eventually get enough deals to make it worth my time. I'll do these 2 services. One's for me and one's for some other people.
Right. So most of the time they're not going to qualify. Back then you could only really do like a partial claim. This was before loan modifications became a bad word, before there was even licensing required. Nobody even knew how to do a loan modification. And so, or let alone a short sale 25 years ago.
Got it.
Okay. So we're kind of like ahead of the curve. Really, there was 2 companies in the whole United States actually doing loan modifications. One had a, Pennsylvania DC address. I forget what it was called. It made it look like it was a government entity. And then we had our company that was doing, we had a deal back then with Google. I think we're only paying 10 cents a click. That was
This is in the early days of Google.
Early days. And if somebody clicked twice because of the IP, we made sure we didn't get charged for that. But we did develop our foreclosure database for our Portland, Multnomah County, Clackamas County, Clark County, Washington, and then Washington County, the Quad County area in around Portland. Mm-hmm. And so all of our data was fresh. And then so McCabe started a real estate brokerage company. And we hired agents, and we'd give them a zip code to track all the foreclosures.
Okay.
Now, back then, there was a big conference called REOMAC, Real Estate Owned, whatever, MAC. It was a conference for realtors that wanted to meet up with the asset managers of the banks. And that's where you would build the relationships to get the REOs for your area.
Got it. Okay.
So McCabe had that relationship, so the brokerage was getting all the REOs. So he was getting first dibs at all the property. But we were also buying, his money, or I can't remember the guy, Bill Davis's money, way back. I don't even think Bill's alive anymore. He was the old guy back then. But they'd put up the money. We'd go to auction. These are the days when you could go to a foreclosure auction and nobody would pay more than 75 cents of fair market value.
Whole different ballgame.
And then literally, I think about 2005 or 6 is when kind of the market changed. And then you had hedge funds getting involved and buying.
Oh, changed it all. So
yeah.
quick.
So it's tough if you have very little capital, you can't go play that game. Because even today, even in your local area, even in Vegas, they're bidding the property up to 94, 95, 98 cents of fair market.
When we were buying foreclosures in 2014, 15, 16 range here, we could buy it, put a for sale sign in the front yard, and resell for $20,000 really quickly. By the end of that year, a company, I forget what they're called now, they were literally buying 20 to 30 houses a month at the auction. And for them, it wasn't about the discount. It was about simplicity. They could go buy 25 houses today by bidding, and it's easier than going to buy with realtors and all that crap. So it was 1970 or above, 3-bedroom or greater, and they would just scrape right through that. And it completely changed our foreclosure opportunities, literally like that. And that's when we had to go start doing pre-foreclosures and door knock.
Yeah, so door knocking in 2001, 2, 3, and 4, I was probably picking up 3 to 5 deals a week.
Dang.
Because the average foreclosures in the Portland metro area was about 100 to 300 a month.
Oh, wow. That's a pretty fair amount. We're a big foreclosure county, and we're 300 to 500 a month, but this is today.
There would be more, but they don't want. They're letting them modify the loans or doing forbearance agreements for years right now.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just they don't want to create the crisis that happened.
All these places are soft because they don't want it to get so bad again.
Right. They don't want to see all that inventory come on the market and then just depress, because I think it puts the banks in trouble, stress testing and all this other stuff. So probably not likely to happen. At least that's my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but
yeah.
So I mean that's essentially that. So then,
so Vegas, you found this system.
Kind of
You're working with a lot of
Vegas,
people, brokers, data.
Found an attorney, started doing surplus proceeds in 04, started in California, and actually another guy showed me how to do that. So then I went to Vegas to do it because nobody was doing it. And even popped into Arizona because very few people were doing it in Arizona. This was 04, 05. And all these states have made laws on surplus proceeds. And we'll probably get into that area, but we made a ton of money in surplus proceeds because
Were you buying the deed right before the foreclosure and then
no, we're doing it a different way. So
they sell their rights to it?
we were buying their rights to it.
Got it. Yeah, in Texas, law changed 5 or 8 years ago or something like that, where you can't do that.
Well, actually,
Is the way I understood it.
the way Texas law works, just like California, Nevada, and Arizona, what they prohibit is not, they don't prohibit buying the right because it's a saleable right. They prohibit an assignment of the right for a fee.
Okay, yeah, I didn't read it all the way, but I had 5 attorneys tell me the same thing. I'm like, guess they're right.
But if you pay them consideration and just do a purchase contract for whatever they call it, excess proceeds, surplus proceeds, every state calls it something different, and you pay them $20,000 for $100,000 surplus proceeds, when the trustee interpleads the funds, all you have to do is get your attorney to file a motion to adjudicate.
Okay, so you think you still can do it.
Yeah.
The guys that I know here, they would just buy a deed to the property and record it right before the foreclosure, and whatever they would pay for that deed is what they were basically paying for that right.
True. Now,
But they've had trustees argue with them more than they expected, so they have to go fight them on it.
right, and it's easier, I think, just to do it clean. If you know it's going to be, so buying the deed before it forecloses, you don't really know what the surplus is going to be. You can have an idea.
Yeah, but you're not sure.
So if you just wait till after it forecloses, you disclose to the homeowner, hey, look, you got $105,028 of surplus. Hey, I can give you $20,000 and I'll buy it right, and then I'll go deal with the
So that's how
attorneys
y'all would do it then after the sale.
after the sale, and then purchase the right.
Got it.
All of our disclaimers and disclosures say, look, the opening bid was X, the closing bid was X, and Joe Smith bought the property or whatever company. So I put that all in my purchase document, like everything. So there's no question.
You know what I like about that? It's very transparent. There's no one will ever be able to come in and say you lied to them, you misrepresented. It's all here.
It's all right here.
And if you don't like the deal, that's fine. There's another one down the street. I'll go do that one. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So it's very, and our attorneys advised us at the time. It was Steve Yarmy and Jeremy Bergstrom who had, it was Miles Bauer Bergstrom was the law firm. It was the largest on the West Coast for Arizona, Nevada, California. They were like the foreclosing trustee for Countrywide and Bank of America back then.
Oh, and those big institutional trustees.
Yeah. So I said, man, I need to go hire them to be my attorney. Right. Makes sense. We cut our deal. They were the one holding the proceeds.
Nice.
And so as long as the junior liens or whoever had claims they paid out, I rarely ever had to go to court after
They're getting
that.
paid on both sides of that deal, so they're conflict wave, but it'll still work it out.
They made $2 million off me in 1 year on surplus proceeds.
Oh, my goodness. Good year.
Good year for them, right? Then as the market shifted in late 05, I want to say it was like October 05 is when I noticed that everything that was on the auction, nobody was buying it.
You're like, what's going on?
Yeah, and it was like, man, this is really, really bad. And so there was no more surplus proceeds. And so I was like trying to figure out like, so what do I do? Like I didn't know anything else to do. I hadn't even gone to college yet. So I had maybe like 2 years under my belt, just, basic general, undergrad education. And so that's when,
And you're still not saving at this point. You're making money, but you haven't started.
right. No. I mean, I was a bottle service guy in the nightclubs in Vegas. So that was
Every time you tell me the next part of the wild part of your life, it's like wilder.
$5,000 a night, so it was like, yeah, I mean, hey, this was my status back then with the nightclub owners in Vegas. And there was only a few nightclubs. It was a really good time back then because I was on a reality TV show in, I guess it was 05, 06. It was called Caesars 24/7 by A&E. And all I did was just a blur. It was drunk and eat, and they gave us like 10 rooms, all for free, and funny gambling money to make it look like we're gambling. It's all fake stuff anyway, right? That's reality TV, but it's not really reality. So when you could go into a nightclub and if Floyd Mayweather was sitting there, they didn't have any tables. They would move Floyd Mayweather and give me the table.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
And then I was like, nah, Floyd, you can stay. Like, just hang out, right? So we became friends.
That's neat.
I mean, and that's, after kind of like from that point, Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz, Rico Rodriguez, these are all friends of mine from back then. Now, different than the last 5 years. I haven't gone out. It's family time.
Life changes.
Life changes. We get older. We move slower. We start forgetting things.
Yeah.
But it's good. So the attorney I had went out on his own. And he said, look, man, come work for me as a paralegal. So I just finished like a paralegal certification course. He's like, hey, I'm starting my own firm. Like, come work for me. And he goes, but, you got to go to law school. And I'm like, okay, let's do this. I had nothing else to do. Where else was I going to work, right? So I spent with Yarmy's firm, up until maybe last couple of years, I was still doing cases with him, But so I went to law school. I went to a California State Bar approved school, so it was like online. It wasn't like traditional ABA law school. So went to law school. That law school folded. Then I went and got my master's of law at Thomas Jefferson School of Law, which is an ABA approved school in San Diego. So that was like 2014. Finished my MBA.
Oh my gosh, MBA too?
I went back to back to back to back. So I actually finished my college
That's
degree.
stuff you could have never done in the early days, but as you get a little bit of maturity and you can kind of focus a little better.
I finished my 4-year bachelor's degree in 15 months.
Jeez.
I challenged the majority of the courses. The deal I had with the professor is let me study. If I get anything less than a B, I got to take the course.
Oh,
I graduated.
So you're able to test out a lot of stuff.
You can.
That way.
Yes, you can. And you can do that in college today, anywhere you go.
Okay.
You can just test out if you want to.
Wow.
It's an agreement with the professor. And so, I graduated from Adams State College, or now it's called Adams State University, with a 4.0.
Dude, that's pretty crazy.
So
From bottle service to now you're professionally educated.
So, what college opened up my eyes. I was kind of more worked with my hands and door knocking, and that was a great living. You don't need a college degree to go do real estate,
Right.
But if you don't read, you really need to understand law to try to get a little ahead of the game so you don't make mistakes. I would advocate for anybody to just, go to a Blackstone or an online paralegal certificate just so you can understand some basics.
Better.
But it'll pick your interest, it'll pick your mind, and then you'll start reading more. And I probably read 3 hours a day, probably an hour and a half before I go to bed. And, sometimes I'm up at 3:30 for like today, I was up at 3:30.
Right when I got into real estate, I remember people always saying, you need to get a good real estate lawyer. You got to learn this and this. And I remember thinking, I just want to go flip houses. Why do I need a lawyer? Well, today legal bills are 50, 60 grand a month. If we don't have any wacky ones popping up, and we're reading legal white papers that attorneys put out for continuing education all the time to figure out something we don't know. I'm like, how did this happen?
Look, the bottom line, the legal system's really weird. It's common sense, but it's not common sense.
Yeah.
But it's the system we have to learn how to work in.
That's what we got. Yeah.
That's what we have. The only way we're going to change it is by the masses through the vote, but we can't seem to all agree.
You start going up to the state capitol and start playing ball with them, and it's a can of worms, man.
And
changing the law is not what
changing
you
the
want
law is like what you're doing, a little bit of lobbying and trying to get a bill up. It costs money because you got to donate to their campaigns and stuff like that to get a bill draft report. And
then you find out they're trading favors for votes, and it's not really what they think or what they care about, but it's a trade to get something else. I'm like,
what kind of system are we living in?
Yeah.
And it's like, how can you vote for this guy to be in office year after year after year or term after term? It's like, I'm a big advocate, not to be political, but for term limits for all parties, Congress, Senate,
agreed,
judges, all of that, and it's, we do live in a system of majority rules, right? And if the minority doesn't like it, well, then go somewhere else.
It's true.
But I think we're starting to see where the minority rule is coming in more than the majority rule, and that's not how our system was built.
Swings both ways, I'll tell you. All right, so anyway, Vegas, you go get a pile of degrees. Now you're working with this law firm. And what's your day-to-day looking like now?
Today?
Not now, like at this time.
Oh, day-to-day was in the law firm, it was generating business, staying up late at night because I'm going to law school. And then after law school and master's of law, it was, a little bit smarter, writing motions a little bit better. Is basically just going out and talking to other real estate investors and say, hey, look, man, there's this thing called Chapter 11 bankruptcy because that's my specialty.
How did you wind up in specializing in that?
A friend of a friend was an attorney, and I had two friends that were losing their houses in 2009, and I had the attorney Steve Yarmy, and my friend Nick Nietzsche was working for Sam Schwartz, who's also my attorney too, but he's like $1,085 an hour. I owe him like about 60 more grand. I got to pay him, I think, next week. So at any rate, they did the first Chapter 11 kind of in Las Vegas, and I was like, Steve, we got two cases. We can help these people out. And they're friends of mine. They're losing their houses. Like, let's try. He's like, I've never done it, but yeah, go study it and figure it out. You write up all the paperwork. I'll review it, and then go get a retainer. So from the first case, we were successful. We crammed down their mortgage. They owed like $1 million on a house that appraised for 200. The bank agreed to rewrite the note at 200 grand.
Oh my God.
Right. Now that house is worth like $1 million more bucks. So from that point on, the two big firms that were doing the majority of the Chapter 11 work in Nevada, just two guys, two flunkies at the end of the day. We were doing just as much casework as they were.
Wow.
With just two guys, an attorney.
Sounds like a very small industry at this point.
Very small. It still is, no matter where you go. It's hard to find like North Carolina, I got some friends that need some Chapter 11. I can't even find an attorney to do a Chapter 11.
Now, what's the difference between the most common ones? Because there are folks out there listening that know what bankruptcy is, but don't really know the differences.
Chapter 7 is a complete liquidation.
I'm broke, ain't coming back, sell it all and pay people.
Yeah, I mean, you have your state law exemptions. So you have, what you can keep your car up to a certain value. And Texas is one of the beautiful states to be able to keep your house because you have an unlimited homestead exemption, right? So if you own your house free and clear, like, the creditors can't come and get it. So Florida and Texas, I think, are the only two states that have unlimited homestead exemptions. Nevada, it's like today it's like 605,000. I think it's probably the third highest state. So it's pretty decent. California is behind times. I think California's homestead exemption today. What a homestead exemption is, folks, is if you owe, let's say your house is worth like 500 grand and you owe 200,000 on it. And somebody sues you because there's a credit card for 50 grand and you're going, oh no, they're going to be able to execute on my house. So the homestead exemption says, look before the creditor can execute against your homestead, they have to be able to pay you the homestead exemption. There has to be money left over after the mortgage is paid, the homestead exemption, and then whatever's left over after that, then they can get paid on
almost
the
like
judgment.
A credit bid on your house that protects your equity and the creditor can have anything above that.
Correct. So, California steals like $75,000 for what property is over there.
Oh my gosh!
I think if you're married or over 55 or something, then it goes up to like 125.
That's effectively no real protection.
Not in California. It's a creditor state.
Got it. Yeah.
So
Texas is, I think, is the opposite. We're a debtor state.
Right.
I remember reading articles about bankruptcy in Texas. And there were people that would do bad deeds or criminal stuff, whatever, in other states. And when they'd come to take them away, like the authorities, there'd be a sign that says, went to Texas. And apparently Texas was like the haven for debtors. Like, it's their place. So I was in that article, it said that's why we have so many free-spirited, rough folks in Texas, because a lot of them came here in this era.
From there.
I don't know how true it is, but I recall the article.
Chapter 7 bankruptcy, complete liquidation. It zeroes out your debt. It's a true, what they call the fresh start. Chapter 13, if you make above a certain amount of income, then you have to, it's if you make more than the median income based on your family size and zip code and wherever you live, you have to pay what they call your disposable income into the pool for your creditors to get a piece of the pie. They call it the pro rata share. So, you still get to pay your car payment, your house payment, your rent, your food. There's an allocation for all that money in a Chapter 13. And then whatever's left over after the statutory, you reach the statutory limits. Now, if you got special needs children or something like that, you get more money for that. Like the judges aren't going to say, no, you can't get it. And the trustee's not going to say, no, you can't get it.
But the leftover goes to creditors until the creditors are done. Can you negotiate your dets down in those cases, or is it tougher?
Well,
because they have equity.
It's all based on if they file a proof of claim or not. So bankruptcy requires a creditor file the instrument that gives them the right to collect, whether it be a promissory note or some invoice or something like that, depending on your creditor.
It's the instrument.
It's the instrument. It's a contract. It's basically the contract, right? And so when you file, there's a statutory noticing period that says you got to file claims if you want to get a piece of the pie by a certain date. So creditors who don't file a claim by that date typically don't get a piece of the pie. Now, strategically, a lot of the credit card companies that file claims, depending, you have a right as a debtor to file an objection to claim. If they don't respond to the objection and the court sustains, guess what? You might not have to pay any of your creditors back at all. And so it's in a 13, it's a tactical practice to file object to all the claims and see who doesn't show up.
A credit card company that you might owe 50 grand to might have a bunch of claims like this against these people, but unless it's worth them hiring a bunch of attorneys to hit all these touch points, they'll lose them.
They're not going to spend a bunch of money to get pennies on the dollar.
Right. Bingo.
So it just goes away. So in a Chapter 13, let's say your disposable income was $300 a month and you have a 5-year plan. So that's $15,000. Well, if you had $100,000 of creditors, they're going to get a little bit, but you're going to be stuck in the Chapter 13 plan until you pay your 15 grand.
Oh, wow.
But if you object to the claims, and let's say you zeroed out all the creditors, you got all their claims thrown out because they didn't show up.
You close it, and the next
phase
of your life, you got money in your pocket again.
You get to keep the 15 grand. Now we get into Chapter 12, which is for farmers. Very rarely. You'll see that in Texas and Idaho and California where there's...
Is this subsidized bankruptcy to keep farmers in production?
Yes and no. There's just some special rules on farmers. There's a little... Because, Congress intended to keep the food supply open, right?
Protects the land.
Protects the land. It protects the farmer. It keeps, our wheat and stuff and commerce going. And, because of...
How old is that law? Sometime around...
probably 1800s, 1900s.
Wow.
Chapter 12 has been around. And then you get into Chapter 11, and that's really where I call it the creative chapter. Because in a lot of cases with Chapter 11, if you can try to get creative with it, if a creditor doesn't respond, that becomes the order of the court.
By omission.
By omission. So learning about Chapter 11... So it was like with my friend, they had 2 houses, one in like Cedar City, Utah, then another one in Vegas. So they appraised, one appraised for, let's say 150 grand, the other appraised for, I think it was 280, 290. Filed the case, filed a motion to value the property at the appraised value. And that's the time where the creditor can object to the value and get their own appraisal. The reason why we're filing the motion, because they had junior liens, like a second home equity line of credit. So in Chapter 11, just like a Chapter 13, but Chapter 13 has debt limits, Chapter 11 does not. Now, after 2020, there's a new chapter called Chapter 11, Subchapter 5. So Chapter 11 has a lot of rules. There's 16 elements to be able to what they call confirm your case. Confirming a Chapter 11 requires your creditors to vote in favor of your plan, and you have to have at least 50% of the votes and 2/3 of the money to confirm your case, or at least an accepting class of creditors that vote in favor. Then the judge can overrule the objection of the other creditors as long as it's fair and equitable.
Did you say 70% of the money?
2/3, 66%.
But you must have that money now.
No, it's not. No, what I mean is, let's say you have $100,000 in unsecured debt, meaning like credit card debt, second mortgages that are getting
50% of them by count or 60% by
let's say you have
value.
10 creditors, it's 100 grand. So you would need 5 creditors to vote in favor, and you would need $66,000 of the claims to vote in favor.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. And if you don't get that in a normal Chapter 11, your case doesn't confirm. You're done.
But so if it doesn't confirm, you filed this, it doesn't confirm, that means the creditors are unwilling to take this the distance. And
right.
It's over with. All those debts go bye-bye.
Chapter 11 is not really an adversarial proceeding. It's a negotiation, just in a different forum.
It's a procedural negotiation.
Correct. The debtor has rights. The creditor has rights.
You know what? There's a threshold. I don't know what this is. There might be almost a formula where if the value of the total claim is claims combined is worth less than say 500 grand, it's not collectively worth all these creditors' time to do this. So you could say, if I get a $400,000 claim, it'll sail without objection because it's not collectively worth their time to do this. Is there like a threshold where you believe that?
No, because it's really funny. Some creditors show up and some don't.
Oh,
I've seen creditors with $750,000 claims not even file a claim. Nothing.
wow.
Then the creditor who's got $5,000 claim is spending $20,000 in litigation.
Yeah, I see that sometimes. What are you people doing?
And I'm like, what is this? So anyway, so it allows you to eliminate. So a creditor is only entitled in a Chapter 11 to the value of the property. Now, because we're talking about real estate here.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you owe $1 million on a piece of property. It's underwater. Appraisal comes in at say $750.
Got it.
And we're starting to see some market deterioration in certain parts of the country.
That'll happen in Austin right now.
It's happening.
25% of the values slipped.
Right. So you're going to see people, Austin's bankruptcies are going to start kicking up. And if they'd be smart, now you cannot do this with your primary residence. It can only be done with investment or rental property.
Oh, non-homestead. Like
non-homestead.
non-qualifying. Or
You
whatever.
cannot modify a homestead property. But if you moved out,
It's not homestead anymore.
then you can do it. You got to get a renter in there, though.
Interesting.
So you could actually right size your ship. And when a creditor is upside down, they're not entitled to any payments during the bankruptcy case unless you agree with them.
Oh, they can't even send you collections letters. I recall it's like
Nothing.
mega strict.
So you can almost finance your bankruptcy case with your rental money that's coming in to pay your attorney.
Because you're not having to pay it now. Hold on a minute. So the income comes in on the rental. You're not making the payments. Your balances are increasing. But if you're getting ready to negotiate those down, maybe that income can.
They don't get to increase the balance either. It stops. Interest and everything.
Can you accelerate or the default rate doesn't
It's
kick
all
in?
if they're not in the paint, they don't get a default rate. They get nothing.
Wow.
Now, if they're what they call an oversecured creditor, meaning there's equity, they get their default rate and all their late charges and everything up until the value of the property. Then it stops.
Got it.
Okay.
Now, how much do these laws differ from Texas to Nevada? Remarkably, or just a little?
No, for the most part, they're pretty uniform in the bankruptcy case. Like there's a lot of good case law out of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is Texas. And I'll tell you some nuances. Like in the 10th Circuit says, which is like Utah, Colorado, and
Oh, this is federal.
federal. Yeah, it's all federal based. But like if a creditor doesn't vote, like if they don't participate in the case, they're deemed to vote for it. That's the rule up there.
The default is in favor.
Yeah, silence is acceptance is how the 10th Circuit views it. In the 9th Circuit, which is the West Coast,
Are they doing that because they say, look, we think this is good. We like bankruptcy to help people get a second chance. If you don't show up, we don't want that to stop us. Let's let it move forward if no one cares enough.
the opinion doesn't really hold that way, but I guess you could imply that.
Okay.
In the 9th Circuit, it's the M. Longhorn Arabians case, but that says is if you don't vote to accept or reject, it just doesn't, nothing counts. It's just silence. Silence is silence. They're not in favor and they're not against. So there could be some jurisdictional, it might be better in some cases to file in a Utah jurisdiction because of this rule. Now, in Chapter 11 bankruptcy, if you have a Utah entity and it owns, say, property in Florida, you can either have the choice to file in Florida or you can have the choice to file in Utah.
Oh, not where the entity or the real estate is. It's either one.
It's either one. So that's where you kind of get that thing, they
flexible.
call it jurisdiction shopping in a way.
Yeah.
You know, California is not a friendly place to file Chapter 11 bankruptcies. It just isn't. It's a creditor.
Wait, but you can take interest in real estate in California and file in Nevada. Then.
Correct. Right.
Okay.
You could take interest in, property anywhere in the United States, including Hawaii or Alaska, and file, if your entity is organized in Nevada or Wyoming or whatever, you can file where it's organized.
Hold on. Wait a second. We got the cart before the horse. Let me back up for a minute. We're getting deep into what bankruptcy is. You're a real estate investor. Let's make this connection.
So
Why are you going so deep into bankruptcy? Because the way I know you is a real estate investor.
part of it is when I started.
Paths cross.
So as a real estate investor, I was always looking for equity, right?
Okay.
That's what we do as for real estate investors. We're looking
Yeah.
for a spread. So when we're looking for a spread, we're looking to get that house for 150, put 20 into it and sell it for, whatever we can get to make our number. When I started working for Yarmy in the law firm and learning Chapter 11 bankruptcy, then there was a mindset shift. Wait a minute. You can create equity out of thin air.
How do you do that?
That's through the bankruptcy process.
Bam.
You
I knew that's where you're going. The moment we start
you
saying,
can
okay.
litigate in bankruptcy because, see, in bankruptcy, you don't have to personally serve anybody. It's done by first-class mail unless it's a bank.
Why do they do it like that?
Those are their rules. They made them. We just follow them.
Is that in certain specific states or is that
That's federal. That's federal rules. Federal rules of bankruptcy procedure.
I understand that would make it easier and easier to prove and easier to execute, a lot less expensive.
A lot less. You can do quiet title actions in bankruptcy court.
I've had to serve like 20 defendants, and it's a pain in the butt. And it's expensive.
And it's expensive. $100 a service, or every time they go out. After a couple, then a affidavit of due diligence, and then you're waiting. Then you got to serve by publication. And it drives. Bankruptcy is once you file an adversary proceeding, you just send it out first class mail. They got
citations, first class mail.
First class mail. If it's to an LLC, it must say to to an officer,
the registered agent.
Or you can do the registered agent. Yes, that's. If it's an entity, you just serve to the registered agent. That's all you got to do. But a lot of people don't think that they're served when they just get mail.
Hold on a minute. Let me throw this in for you. I was just recently in some real estate lit. The Secretary of State was served for us. And this didn't make any sense to me. And I was told by the attorney that for a corporation, a plaintiff can serve the Secretary of State our paperwork, and that's considered acceptable service.
Correct. It's
No one will ever catch that. We had an attorney all in it, and he was ready to go, so he uncovered that. But they said, we served the Secretary of State last week, and we're like, I didn't know that.
And the Secretary of State is supposed to forward the information on.
Yeah, but they better do it within 21 days. I got a chance to respond.
There's probably a legal argument there to say, how would we know?
Right, yeah.
Just because they got it, they would have to notify us that they got it. But, again.
So no one intentionally does that in this world.
Right.
Okay.
So with bankruptcy, though, it's first-class mail unless it's an FDIC-insured bank. Then you have to serve it by certified mail. That's it. Simple.
$5.
Right. And because typically bankruptcy is supposed to be designed to expeditiously move forward, not drag out.
I always thought this was a dichotomy. You're going into court saying, I don't have enough money to make good on my bills, but lawyer, come do all this. I'm going to pay this lawyer a ton of money. I watched some stuff on Giuliani's bankruptcy. I'm like, this is a clusterfuck.
So here's how. So bankruptcy has a lot of one of the rules is they have what they call priorities of who gets paid. So the first priority is domestic support, child support, alimony, taking care of your family's number one. Those are that's the first priority debt. The second priority of the debt is to your attorney. The IRS is an 8th priority debt.
Wow. Who else is above them? You got lawyers,
trade creditors. If you had employees and you were a business and go in bankruptcy, they're like a 3rd or 4th or 5th priority. So they're
protecting the people here.
They're protecting the people. The government's the last one to get protected, more or less. I mean,
in that case, I think that's a reasonable thing.
A lot of people have a problem with bankruptcy because of a moral issue, but you have to get past the moral issue. It's a constitutional thing. The Constitution provides for bankruptcy.
That was one of the reasons people came to the United States.
To have a constitution.
Have a constitution and also have protection from creditors. Over there, they throw you in prison or whatever the hell they do, right?
I've probably seen so many people, and I've worked on like 250 Chapter 11 cases, since like 2009. But I see a lot of people reach into their retirement accounts to pay this, to pay that, and then all of a sudden they're broke.
Ugh.
Now they don't have money to pay the attorney. When all that they should have done is your retirement accounts are protected in bankruptcy up to like $1.5 million or maybe even more, maybe $2.2 million or something.
Wow.
Congress protected your retirement from the reach of creditors. So it's like when
These
people
are strong consumer or debtor laws, man.
Well, they understand that Social Security is not really probably going to cut the mustard.
True.
So as you start saving in your 401k and IRAs and stuff like that, they wanted to protect that so that you had a retirement. To the extent Social Security was not around, then you have this 401k or whatever, your pension plan you could draw from to live out your final years.
Your life savings.
Right.
So let me rewind again a little bit. So you just told me why being involved in real estate as an investor looking for equity, why the bankruptcy rules can be helpful. But what does this look like in a project? Because I know there are listeners out here who are dealing with like stripping judgments or liens or resolving ownership fights or whatever and get to the equity. And it's much quicker to connect those dots. So now we have this concept of not enough equity. Let's try to make some with bankruptcy laws. What does this look like in an investment project?
So for my own cases that I've done in my own LLCs, I'm looking for buy and hold type property. Also in Chapter 11, you can modify interest rates. You can modify the term and the interest rate. You can modify any contractual right.
Holy cow.
Okay.
Chapter 11 is a full-blown negotiation. It's better than origination in the beginning.
And I will say probably more than 50% of the cases that I've had filed, the creditors don't even show up. What? And then you're kicking yourself in the butt. Man, I should have put them in at a 3% interest rate. Instead, there's like there's some case law on what the rate's supposed to be in a bankruptcy, like post, whatever. So like if the rate's already low, you're not going to modify it. If it's really high, you can modify it lower. But there's an old Supreme Court case called Till versus SCS Credit Corp that said they gave a prime plus 2 factor. So prime plus 2 is not a good interest rate today,
Right.
But 20 years ago or even 15 years ago when prime was at like 3.25, we were rewriting these subprime loans in 2009 and 10 back to 5.25.
In your loan mod agreement, so to speak,
It's called a stipulation and order. Stipulation.
It's a bankruptcy court judgment that you record, and that becomes your new note.
Well, it's actually part of what they call a plan of reorganization.
Okay.
So the plan is basically sets out a bunch of statutory like mumbo jumbo. Then it basically gets to the nut and bolts of how you're going to treat your creditors. So you're proposing a plan for your creditors to vote on to say, this is how I'm going to repay them, my secured and unsecured creditors. Okay. And then you send out a ballot for voting. Or somebody makes an appearance, you have your attorney get a hold of their attorney, and you start the negotiation. And you're just really looking to get a vote. So from a secured creditor standpoint, you put each secured creditor in its own class because it's got its own class of debt. All you need is one of those secured creditors.
Class by category, by priority.
Class 1, Class 2, Class 3, right? You just need one of your classes to vote in favor. That's all you need. Now, if you took early on in my studies and doing the work was we would take all the secured mortgage creditors and we would put them in one class. We'd got Class 1, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We figured that was dumb because now we needed 2/3 of that class and 50% of the money.
If you split them up, it's real easy to get one.
Yeah. If we just own class, it's easy to get one. And sometimes you might impair that creditor nominally to get the vote. So they're owed, let's say, $5,000. You say, look,
give it easy to them.
$4,700. You just have to have an impaired creditor voting.
Dude, this is incredibly complex.
It's very complex, very, very complex, and it'll be hard for anybody to grasp. I mean, look, the first few cases I worked on, I still didn't understand the whole process until probably 5 years later, till I finished my master's of law in business bankruptcy.
Yeah, I'm mapping some of this as you're talking through it. I'm like, wow, there's like a lot of steps. This is a big decision tree right here.
It's a lot of rules, a lot of negotiation. There can be a lot of dogfights, but I mean, it can work. And
with those complexities come caveats like opportunities.
Opportunities, yes. If you have a creditor like a judgment holder that's been sitting for a long time, if that judgment holder is not like Texas is different because of the homestead exemption, but you take another state where there's a low homestead exemption and there's equity in the house. If the judgment holder is not really like forcing a sale, a sheriff's sale, constable sale of that debt and taking the equity out of the house, you don't necessarily want to wake the dragon. They might not even know that the person owns real estate.
Right. California, careful. You don't have much protection at all, and all properties are expensive, so that's a risky
And they got a
proposition.
10-year statute of limitations on the judgments are good for 10 years.
Wow.
And renewable.
So that's not a place you want to play ball as much.
Well, it can. It can be. It's the totality of circumstance.
Unless you're the creditor.
Or I'll buy property or take it subject to with inflated debt, with a lot of debt on it. Because
what's your definition of inflated debt in this case?
So in this case, let's just take the example of $1 million is owed on this property. And let's say there's a first mortgage for like $500,000.
Got it.
Okay. Because it's going to be a rental property, the case law in California says if it's a rental property, you should value the property under an income approach.
Okay.
Okay.
So you're renting it for $700.
Well, no, it's fair market. You got to go through the fair market rent analysis. But
Okay.
let's just say the fair market rent is, $3,300. Then you take out the expenses, maintenance, property taxes, insurance.
$1,000 a month, $12,000 a year.
Okay.
Net.
At a 10% capitalization rate,
$120,000.
$120,000.
Nothing.
Okay.
A little extreme.
A little bit extreme. So we might lower the capitalization rate to say 8% to at least get it up to like $400,000.
Okay.
Okay. Or $500,000 what the first mortgage debt is owed. So in bankruptcy, we get an appraisal for $500,000. That's what's owed to the first, the junior, the judgment holder, the IRS. They're not in the paint anymore. They're no longer secured. They treat that secured claim and move it into an unsecured or general unsecured class.
Okay. And that's determined by the equity of the property based on
The
this
appraisal.
formula.
They have a legal right to object to that appraisal. Judgment holders, IRS, city liens, county liens, code violations, nuisance type stuff. They're not they're not going to go get an appraisal.
Let's look at this from a broad stroke, though. I mean, this is complicated. If big bank is going to hire an attorney to do all these steps, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in legal fees. If they have 50 of these bankruptcies, they're spending $5 million in legal fees to try to protect.
Well,
$10 million in debt?
how the creditors' firms work.
Oh, they contingency work.
No, They get flat feet on everything because they're getting 1,000 files a month. They're they're only going to get $1,000 a file, regardless of what's going on.
Oh wow! So then they use lower quality.
Lower
folks
quality,
to process.
yeah. It's just they do mills. It's like a mill, a creditor. There's creditor mills out there, and they're not going to get into the litigation because they're not staffed or geared up for it. They're going to get in more of the negotiation.
Okay.
But a lot of times they miss. I mean, you got to think of populations getting bigger. The banks have more files. They miss some of the notices from the court.
I believe it. I watch it on tax lawsuits.
Right.
Okay, so hold on. Sorry to cut you off here, but this is fascinating. There's so much stuff going on. So now that we've established why bankruptcy can be helpful to a real estate project, but walk me through a 5-minute case study because there's a lot of stuff happening here. Let's tighten this up very simply for someone who's listening.
There's an active case I have going right now. It's California property, Nevada entity. So there's this thing we've all heard it, and there's articles by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It's all over mortgage news in the last, say, couple of years of zombie mortgages.
Yeah.
So this is interesting. I have a case with a zombie mortgage. It's usually the zombie mortgages are seconds or home equity lines of credit, but it's some sort of junior lien. When these all went into default in 2008, 9, and 10, and 11, properties were way underwater. There was nothing for these junior lien holders to collect. They've been silent now for 10, 15 years.
And the equity's going like this.
And now the equity's back up to where they can collect. But depending on the state you're in, there's statute of limitations on the installment payment.
4 year.
4 years, 6 years. Ohio is like 10. Some other state has a 15-year statute. But generally, it's 4 to 6 years. And some wobblers 5. So 4 to 6 is pretty common. California's 4 years. So last payment on this zombie debt was January of 2009. The notice of default, though, says March 20th of 2009. And so in this case, we agreed with the creditor because it's their document. We don't want to get into evidentiary hearing of a mini trial of establishing, was it January or March? Let's just go with their debt. Now, fast forward, they didn't start foreclosure till December 11th of 2023. And from 2009 to 2023, they never sent the borrower any more statements.
Oh, aren't they supposed to send an annual or something
Okay,
like
listen. In the Code of Federal Regulations for credit card debt and mortgage and home equity lines of credit, if a creditor is supposed to charge it off 180 days after the initial default. When debt is charged off by federal law, by federal rule, they can't collect interest for all the duration unless they start sending statements again. That's the law. So if they went right to a notice of default with no statements and they're still trying to collect all this
that? No
thing,
more collections.
it's like, who's got the clean hands, right?
And this becomes complicated to prove and do metadata from your computer system with an audit log and all this. It's deep. That ain't happening, is it?
Well, when they file their proof of claim, they have to give you a whole loan history. The evidence is there. The evidence is in the notice of default when they said, here's the date of default, the last payment made. So you're establishing your statute of limitations issue right there. So let's say it's a 30-year loan, but they haven't paid in 15 years, and there's still 15 more years to maturity. The creditor still has a right to collect from today forward, but they have no right to collect from, say, in California, 4 years back. So we would look back from 2025 to 2021.
So you basically got 50% of the mortgage has been paid. So original principal balance is half remaining.
Right. So,
and equity's gone up.
Litigating those types of deals like that, you're creating the equity now.
So let's say a property that's $1 million and had a lien, a mortgage lien of how much?
Let's say 500 first.
500.
Then let's say it was a 250 or 300 second that hasn't been paid. Now the
They're 800 grand, 900 grand.
Well, yeah, that 250 now they're trying to collect, $500,000, $600,000,
So now you're at 1.3 million.
So now, hey, wait a minute. If I can knock out 10 or 11 years of that default interest or those payments that are not collectible, now you
take that 500, you strip the second position and take that 500 down to 250.
Now you got 250 equity.
Okay.
So you typically can't litigate this issue in state court on a non-judicial side. So you're basically going to go to bankruptcy court, and the creditors will always argue, "Oh, it's an ill-suited purpose. They're just using the bankruptcy forum to get rid of this claim. This should be kicked back to state court." Most of the judges are going to be like, "No, this is what bankruptcy is for: is to reorganize. You're not allowed to collect what you're saying you can collect." And you're only entitled to collect what you're entitled to collect, period. So you really can utilize the process to get rid of interest that's not collectible, and then create the equity out of it that way. Now, if you get your appraisal for 500 and you're doing a lien strip and they don't show up, now you just made 500 grand.
Now you're really in the money. So a project like this, I always ask myself when I'm looking at things, scope, schedule, budget. How long does something like this take? What's it cost roughly? And what does it take, a team of 10 lawyers?
No,
or is it one guy? Like
a high-level legal assistant, paralegal, and an attorney, right? That's it. So typical cost for Chapter 11 for one property, depending on the attorney, depending on the jurisdiction and the cost of living, is going to be about 15 grand to 30 grand. And there's a lot of factors that depends. Is there going to be no litigation? It's just a smooth sailing case because there's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of motions that have to get filed for the rules, bankruptcy procedural rules that have to get filed in 11s that don't get filed in other chapters.
So let's just say 40,000 or less is a real easy number to be sure if you're making a budget.
Right. I would say 40 grand. Yeah, multiple properties.
And how long does a case like this take?
Usually you should be done with no litigation. You'll be done in 6 months. Some judges will let you get done in 80 or 90 days.
Whoa.
Yeah. The fastest case that I ever had done was a case was 87 days, start to finish.
That's fast. And for such a complicated matter, that's like breakneck speed. Judicial system ain't fast, but that's fast.
I mean, let's see, filed a case March 31st of last year, and I think we finished it September 4th.
Goodness. Okay, so
that was when we just recently stripped off $1.5 million in debt.
So for me, I look for tax delinquent and ownership and title problems. That's easy. I can pull down records and just, load those deals up. There's tons of them. But almost looks like you're looking for a needle in a haystack.
Not really, because you'll be surprised. If you start looking for judgments, properties with clouded titles like judgments and IRS liens, there's where you're going to find your gems.
So you're going to look by the defect. Judgments, IRS liens, which get recorded
Code
in
enforcement violations.
Okay.
All that stuff that's got all these little liens on it that are junior to a first mortgage, right?
Why I like the IRS is they're everywhere. They're easy to find. They're easy to read. You can to index them, pop it in, and boom, the list comes out.
There it is. Then it's just
in land records.
Yeah. Then today, you can almost pull everybody's phone number or email address with skip tracing software.
So then, how do you find these deals? Do people bring them to you as a referral?
Most people bring them to me as a referral. So what I've done, you find me a deal, we'll just partner up on it, and we'll go into the bankruptcy. I'll put up half the cost. You put up half the cost.
Okay. Then tell me, this is what I need to know now. And I know people out there want to listen because this is not something you're going to try to learn on your own, but it's really interesting strategy. What would a person out there who's listening, what do they need to see in a deal without knowing all the special things to say, this sounds like a Chris deal?
Okay, this is how I look at a deal. And I'm just going to be a hypothetical. It could be we probably don't want to do it on a $150,000 or $200,000 house just because of legal costs, right? But we got to be able to create at least a 6-figure spread. Otherwise, it's just not worth my time or your time by the time we get done with it. Mm-hmm. So let's say there's $1 million in liens on the property. We're looking for a first mortgage that is probably let's say the property's $1 million, and let's say the fair market value under a sales comparison approach is say $800,000.
Okay.
Let's say the first mortgage is $500,000. So we're looking for a first mortgage.
You say first mortgage. Do a lot of these properties have multiple mortgage liens?
A lot. Sometimes they'll have. Usually it's first and second.
Okay.
Then you'll see the IRS and judgments and everything else after that. So we look for that $500,000 or whatever. We look for a first mortgage. We're not going to mess around with the first mortgage. They're an ally for us. We'll have the property appraised under an income approach, so we get the property value down to $500,000.
Okay.
Now we go into bankruptcy court and we're going to strip everything above $500,000. Now that creates our equitable position. Okay, so even if they are going to litigate a little bit, judgments in IRS not likely to litigate. And some judgment holders will if they're like maybe a hard money lender that's more sophisticated. But banks typically, where they filed for lots of like merchant loans and credit card debt, they're not coming to court on a check. They're just going to get stripped off. Okay,
it's not worth their time.
It's not worth their time. Look, they borrow money at the discount window for what, a quarter point, and they charge us 18%. Did they really lose?
Yeah.
So those are the type of deals to look for. Even if there, let's say, is property-backed property taxes and there's some judgments, or there's a multitude of judgments, well, maybe we get the property appraised for $50,000, and there's another 150 of juniors behind that of judgments and whatever else. That's worth looking at. Some people will get paid. It's all about the appraisal and the income approach. How do we get there? Appraisers by law can do what they call a restricted appraisal.
A restricted appraisal.
So a restricted appraisal says this appraisal its only intended purpose is your eyes only.
Okay, it's almost like a private thing.
It's a private appraisal.
While you're talking, I'm going to Google this.
Okay. And it's a different form. There's a different cover sheet for the appraisal. It's still appraised. Now you get to tell the appraiser, say, Mr. Appraiser, I want you to appraise this property under this hypothetical condition.
Is that specific? Is that specific appraisal under the bankruptcy laws, or is that a general thing?
That's under the appraisal. Appraisers have to file the use PAP rules, right?
Got it.
So normally they can't have any influence by the person ordering the appraisal unless it's a restricted appraisal.
A restricted appraisal report is defined by USPAP as a condensed appraisal report intended for a specific client or named intended users containing limited detail and data and may not be fully understood without the appraiser's work file. That's like dead on. That's it.
So I say, hey, rental income is this, and I want you to appraise it based on this capitalization rate. It's the easiest $500 that appraiser made because he just has to listen to his scope of work, and I'm giving him his scope of work.
Got it.
12% cap rate, $10,000 a year in income. You know, it's $100,000 appraisal type thing.
Yeah, simple.
It's simple. So, yes, if it got challenged in court, you're going to lose, but you're betting on nobody showing up. Okay. And if they do show up, okay, then it's just what do you negotiate, right? Then you're in just
you're at the table now. Let's talk.
Let's talk. You know, because in bankruptcy, here's another thing you can do in bankruptcy. Let's say you've got some really recalcitrant, what do we call them? Creditors. They're not going to play ball. So there's this rule in bankruptcy. It's a code section called post-petition financing. You file the bankruptcy. The day you file the bankruptcy creates a petition. Everything after it's called post, everything is before it's called pre. So I go to Logan. I say, Logan, I need you to loan me $300,000 to pay off a couple of these credits. So let's just say it's a $700,000 property, and we have $700,000 of debt, and the junior lien holders are going, you got to pay us, or you're going to have to pay us through the plan. So I'm going to call Logan and say, look, would you loan me $300,000? The court's going to give you first position, but I need you to loan it to me at better than what the rates are out there because it's got to be a benefit to the estate, the bankruptcy estate. So you agree you're going to give me 3% money, but maybe the default interest rate is 10% a month compounding.
Okay.
Okay. So the judge will allow Logan to come in and be a lender and prime everybody else and give him first position by court order.
Yeah, you're a superior position to the first lien if this is happening.
Right. So you get to jump ahead in front. All the juniors they stay their place. You become number one lien. Bankruptcy case gets confirmed. I do a cash for keys agreement with you. And you foreclose everybody out.
So do you close the bankruptcy? Oh, this is part of your restructuring plan. You've done this. You take this money and you're supposed to pay everyone, do all this, but you don't make, but a borrower doesn't make good on that loan.
Damn it.
And the lender.
I ran into some hard times with you. You foreclosed me out. By the time you foreclosed, your debt went from 300 to 500 or 600.
Fascinating.
Damn, creditor, you made a lot of money because I agreed for this default rate to be so high in exchange for a lower interest rate in the thing.
Wow.
And I started drinking too much and I forgot to pay you. And now it's a compounding. 30,000 the first month, 40,000 the next month, 60,000 the next month. That $300,000 debt in 10 months doubles.
Oh gosh. How long did it take to conceptualize this? Was this an exercise or was this the summary of many different events and things starting to come together?
This was the summary of 100 bankruptcies.
Got it.
And then going to grad school for my master's of law and doing the work, reading case law, going, man, that's a pretty cool strategy. Reading articles. I have another certification. It's called a insolvency and restructuring advisor. It takes 4,000 hours supervised under an attorney to get that certification.
Wow. And that's what you have?
Yeah. And so I haven't renewed it because I was like, okay, it's some letters behind your name.
4,000. That's like 2 years worth of work. 4,000
like
hours.
4 years.
Oh, half-time.
Because the attorney has to present all the hours you've worked on every specific case to equal 4,000. Like you have to give all of your hours.
Wow.
So it's just experience, right? And then, building relationships with other bankruptcy attorneys, creditors attorneys over the years, and then bouncing off ideas off people too.
Yeah, war room, like what's going on there. So, okay, when I look at a project, like there are several different ways to work similar projects or just different outcomes and strategies. One of the questions I always ask myself is, if the time I put into this and the money that I put into it, is that at risk? What's the probability of loss? What's the probability of this not working at all and all the money I've invested into professional services and hard costs goes bye-bye? What's that look like?
That's one of the things I take a hard evaluation before I jump in the fray. So depending on who the servicer is.
You're making judgment calls.
Yes, because it's my past experience. I know who shows up and I know who doesn't show up.
Yeah, the average person without that institutional knowledge would be useless, I think,
Right.
here.
And so that's really what it comes down to. It's my experience of 16 years in this space now.
Is there anybody that you know that understands stuff in this way?
Oh, look, there's some really, really sharp attorneys out there. I got to say, like, Sam Schwartz, based out of Vegas, licensed in Texas, licensed in Illinois. He does $2 billion bank. I mean, his last fee application in a case we were working on at the firm I was with, their fee application was like $4 million. That was the attorney's fees. It was a big business. But listen to this case. So it's called Basic Water Company. They filed bankruptcy. They got an old pipeline from Lake Mead to do industrial water to the industrial metals places for the war efforts way back when. Okay, so their business model is they just rent the pipeline. Mm-hmm. The businesses get the water right from the Department of Resources, whoever, the Colorado River Association, the government, and they get 10 cents a gallon or whatever it is. Well, when Lake Mead went down, their straw went dry. So this is where I learned about whether a right-of-way is valid or not.
You know what? I remember talking with you about water line right-of-ways.
We shook them down for our client for like $200,000 because their right-of-way, it was a federal right-of-way from like the 1958. It expired in 2008.
This is a super long pipeline.
16 miles.
Okay. I mean, it's long, but,
But back in the 50s, the government
owned. How long was this right away that you were looking at?
Like 400 feet. It took
400 feet of 16 miles.
It took out a half an acre of land. So because that's considered an inverse condemnation, you're entitled to the value of the land that you took out of service because you can't put concrete over it.
Yeah.
It was like a pipeline 16 feet down underwater, but
no real improvements.
It was really interesting. The case law is so on point. And then the federal regulations say these right-of-ways, some of these easements, they expire that the federal government gave the utility companies in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. They expire. In the 70s, they automatically expire after 30 years.
Why did they do this? Why did they add this big expiration clause?
Nobody was forward thinking. It was for some sort of effort, like a war effort or something at the time. They needed manufacturing for that area for whatever it was. Now, what happens in those 30 years? Well, the BLM auctions the land off. The developers buy it. Now it's individual lot owners. The rule says when the BLM, the government auctions the land off, the right-of-way holder can get a permanent easement or a permanent right-of-way. Okay. But they have 6 months to apply for it. If they don't, they have to negotiate with the property owner. Well, there's a clause in there that you can rescind their right-of-way and kick them off the property. Like pipelines, electrical, any sort of utility, you can say you got to go.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of remediation work. So they're going to have to pay out.
You litigate inverse condemnation, you get an appraisal on the land, and you get paid the value of the land taken out of service.
So you got 16 miles minus 400 feet. What about the other 15 and 9?
We were trying to knock doors and get a bigger class of like a lawsuit going and then take a percentage of it.
What happened? It wouldn't work.
No, I don't want to do that. Some people are like, yeah, let's do it. Then it's like, okay, the pipeline crosses your front yard. You're not really using it. What's the value of that? A couple of grand?
Right.
So it gets into the value and it's like, this is going to be a lot of work for a little bit of money. But when you're out there buying property, look at the right-of-way and ask your title company to give you the right-of-way certificate.
So looking at your title commitment, looking at the exceptions from coverage and looking at all the instruments of record and asking yourself, what really are these? Do they even matter or not?
Right. Because you might be able to get, if it takes out, a considerable amount of land, if it's a pipeline, you can't put a garage, you can't park on it. I mean, you can park over it, but
you can't improve it.
You can't improve it. You can't put a pool, you can't put a garden, like you're kind of stuck. So if that half an acre is worth $100,000, at least you're going to get $100,000. You're going to get what the appraised value of that section of land is.
This is such a small bit of information that's hidden. How did you come across this?
Because a friend had a problem.
in a conversation
And
said, wait, there's more.
I said, let me do a little research. Let me research the case law on this. Let me do some reading. And then it was like, oh, bam. And I'll tell you, the first conversation we had with this specific trespasser, they said, F you, we're not going to pay you a dime.
They felt good about that.
Right. So we filed our motion to reject the right-of-way or rescission of the right-of-way.
Is that like a new claim, like an original pleading?
No, that's the statute says you file
a motion.
Not a motion, just you send them a rescission notice.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's like a non-judicial thing.
Well, you still have to kind of go judicial. You send them the initial notice and you're going to have to go get a court say, you're trespassing, you're off, or you got to pay.
So you need to send that notice, then go get it adjudicated.
Correct.
Okay. Wow.
And so in the court, the seminal court case on this is from like 1939 about power
Seminole.
lines.
So this is.
It was a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals case, but it's cited everywhere. It was power lines. Washington Water Power was trespassing the power lines on somebody else's land. And they used some quotations from the case, and I can't recall what it is, but the reality of it is those quotations, when I was in, this case is not even this holding what they're saying. It has nothing to do with the issue at hand. And we pointed out what the actual holding is, and it specifically said is this does not like prevent the owners from negotiating on what value it's supposed. It was something, but anyway, once we filed that 2 days before the hearing, they go, okay, I got 185. I think they started at 60 grand. I got 60 grand for you. I said no. Then hours before the hearing, they were at 185.
That's what everybody settles right before trial.
Right. Now, and this was just going to be a hearing on the motion to set it for evidentiary purposes.
Yeah.
And then attorney calls and he goes, okay, I got 200 grand for you.
They thought this has got to end it.
Done.
So at that
point, and then they said, well, there's another pipeline and there's still another pipeline that is trespassing that hadn't paid yet. I said, if you want to get a global deal, have them throw in another 25 grand and we'll do a whole global thing. The local water company said, pound sand, we're not paying a dime. So that's still litigation for another day.
Holy cow. These are two very interesting, I don't know what you'd call these, two very interesting things that can either mean nothing to anybody or so much to a few parties.
It could be a niche, like somebody's niche to try to make money in real estate. Just looking at old right-of-way agreements and old like easement agreements, especially from the federal government. So you have to think of let's go back a little bit. Are the people that were working for the BLM or that water company or that utility company in 1958 still alive? No.
Right.
How many generations have already passed through that? That paperwork is in some archive storage with 3 inches thick of dust.
Good luck finding it.
So title companies, people just assume that if it's a right-of-way, it's valid. But if it's coming from the federal government, it all had expiration dates on it. The longest,
it's interesting.
By law, the longest right-of-way was 50 years. And then in the 70s, it was only 30 years.
Which seems like a lifetime, but I don't know.
We're 50 years. Actually, we're 70 years beyond that now, almost. So the majority of the right-of-ways you'll see that were given in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and then they kind of went away in the 70s. And so if you see them from the 70s, those only lasted for 30 years. That was by statute. And so somebody who has time and to go mine this data, and it's going to be in areas you'll see this issue like Nevada, where it was all government land up until through basically the 90s. Yeah.
So a friend of mine is working on some cases in East Texas where there were roads that were they're platted roads, they're public, they were put into commission by the commissioner's court, and the municipality or the county stopped maintaining them, but they weren't not declassified. They're
supposed to be abandoned.
They weren't abandoned by the same way they weren't abandoned the way they're supposed to. You go in the commissioner's court and vote and you abandon them. They didn't do that. So this property, lots of these like hundreds of acre tracts are generally landlocked. So he was buying them and identifying where these roads are on the 10 commissioner court records. and then asking the county to improve the road or suing the commissioner's court. So he's won multiple judgments in an East Texas county for, hundreds of acres. He's buying for 1,000 or 2,000 acres. It's worth 5 to 10 an acre now. He's gotten successful verdicts on these. So now he's going through and getting it improved and solving these problems. This is such a unique thing, but there's so much like it. So the question is, can you find it? Can you use an AI tool to identify this stuff in land records en masse and result a lead list?
That's the hard part right now is, you can go get these records from the BLM. You just got to know how to search for them by the old legal descriptions.
Gosh, and those change over time.
And those changed because it was based on the tract of land, and it's a real short legal description. Now it's been cut up 50 times and, 50 transit, like now it's a full drawn out meets and bounds, but it can be done. It's just, again, it's time. I don't know if AI can go out and search for that quite yet, but it's getting there.
Yeah.
And so.
Chris, this is incredibly fascinating. You have no idea what's out there until you start asking the right people the right questions, and wow.
There's a lot of other stuff that I've done that gets into some niche stuff, like, the way people do surplus proceeds. They actually made a law in Nevada against me back in like 2006 or 7.
Really?
And that was when, like, typically people go in, you get surplus proceeds for like a percentage of the deal or a flat fee, right?
In Texas, it's not more than $1,500 or 10% or something like that.
Nevada's the same way. Arizona's, I think, $2,500. California even is more restrict. So we had a little bit, the approach to it is don't do that. Take it outside the statute. The statute tells you what you can or cannot do.
Don't collect on their behalf. Maybe there's another way to do it.
If you buy it from them, just like buying their real estate, purchase contract, and pay them consideration. Example is this. They have a $100,000 surplus claim. Instead of trying to get in the deed beforehand, before it forecloses and give them thing, let it foreclose.
You know the number because you saw the
number.
sale.
You got to be fully transparent with the number. You're going to say, hey, look at opening bid on your house was $1. It sold for $100,001. You're entitled to $100,000 minus reasonable trustee fees and potential claimants making a claim against this money. I'm willing to pay you $20,000 for your right to the claim.
Open, clean.
You can go into court with your contract and say, see, here's the cashier's check or the bank wire. I have always used just a third-party escrow company and let them pay their fee, whatever it is, just so it creates some neutrality. There's a paper trail. They did get the money. They signed all the escrow papers. It was voluntary. There was nothing compelled or duress, right?
Yeah.
And I've gone into court and said, look, I'm the claimant now because I bought their claim. And usually within 60 days, the money's released. So
the law changed how?
Because they thought it was predatory that people were like me were coming in and getting a percentage of their proceeds that they were going to get anyway.
The problem is most of these people don't go collect the overages.
They don't know about it.
It's a mess. They got to have it together. If they don't have enough to figure out how to keep their house above water and handle that all, are they really going to go get a lawyer, go into the court, go do all this stuff? Probably not. And they're probably out of money anyway.
And most of the time the trustee says, because I just got one letter on a property, it just says there's surplus proceeds. You may have a right to claim. It never tells you how much.
Yeah, it doesn't say $200,000
and when
or
you're
whatever.
Mentally, when you're in that situation of despair, whatever's going on in their life.
One more bill. They don't even answer it.
They're not even answering the mail. They're just looking at that going, oh, another law firm? I don't even want to know what that says.
That's right. You're right.
So then what happens, it just goes into the court, and then it escheats to the state after 3 or 4 years, whatever the limitations period on that, and nobody, the government gets it. It just sits.
Yeah.
So that's a good little niche. And, if you decide you find those claims, I'll buy those claims. So if you buy it from them and you want to sell me your claim, I'll give you cash today for your claim.
Well, you know what? Actually, that's a great – I know we have to wrap it up because you got to catch a plane. If folks want to find you, Chris, where's the best place, the easiest?
So I have a tax firm too, one of the many things that I do. It's called thetaxfirm.us. Look, I'm pretty liberal with my time. I'll talk to anybody to help you out if you're a newbie. You need some guidance, tax structures, whatever. But it's thetaxfirm.us. Just book a time. It's free for the first 30 minutes. And, If there's a deal to be made or money to be made and we can make money together, then let's go make money together.
That's it. These are the kind of deals that are just incredibly complicated. They're not simple. But if you want to learn on the fly and have a credible person to do it with, Chris sounds like your guy. Chris, I can't thank you enough for coming and spending your afternoon with us. I hope you enjoyed hanging out with our people here, and
loved it.
I really enjoy this. This is
I'll
fun.
come back again. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's thank you for the opportunity to speak to your audience and community. We're all trying to build our own personal brands as well. So this is a great opportunity. And when he has good people on all of his, all of your podcasts have been great because I've viewed them. It promotes the greater good of we all have a common goal is let's learn and make money and just do people right, Good
community, good people, earn a little money together. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
When we do a second round, we're going to do some case studies probably coming into this year. So that'll be a fun time to bring one up and war room it on the board.
Yeah. I have all of the court documents, judge's orders signed. So that will be pretty cool. So you can see this, no way you can't do that. There's naysayers all the time, but here's the court order. Here's the HUD one. This is how we do it. This is how much we made. It's very transparent. It's all public record.
Well, let's wrap it up and get you on the plane. Thanks so much.
My commitment to you is to deliver the most interesting, messy, and profitable real estate deals on earth. And in exchange for that, I only ask that you subscribe to this podcast and share it with a friend who can benefit.